Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we have a really cool video where I'm going to be reading the entire excerpt of the Luke versus Vader duel from the Return of the Jedi novel by James Caan. And this provides a much more in detail and more in-depth look at that duel and what was going through Luke's head and what was going through Vader's head and how they were fighting, how aggressive were they, bashing each other, in the movie it looks intense, but once you get the emotion behind it, it's much clearer, and it adds a layer of emotion to that fight that, I get, but some of the normies might not understand, and this is a really cool resource to have. And this is the original version of the book, too. I think it's a first printing. Yes, it is. This is a first edition, actually, that I own. So, it's not convoluted by Disney or anything. This is just the book, from 1983, which is awesome. So, without further ado, I am going to find that section and we will get started. All right, so we're going to start from practically right when the duel starts. There's a lot of really cool stuff before about Luke, kind of feeling the dark side start to overwhelm him and overflow him, and he's trying to kind of wash out the dark side, and he's really struggling. And that's really the first part where Palpatine's manipulating him. But for time's sake, I'm not going to go into that section. So let's start. Yeah, Luke's face was, or starting now. Luke's face was contorted, reflecting his spirit. Vader watched him carefully, as did the Emperor. The lightsaber began to shake on its resting place. The young Jedi's hand was trembling, his lips pulled back in grimace, his teeth grinding. So that's something you don't get in the movie. So apparently the saber was actually rumbling with his anger on the Emperor's throne. That is so cool, right? I honestly, I wish that was in the actual final cut, but for effects sake, they probably couldn't do that. But that would have I think been even more, shown more furiosity in that moment. So yeah, continuing on, the Emperor smiled. Good, I can feel your anger. I am defenseless. Take your weapon, strike me down with all your hatred, and your journey toward the dark side will be complete. He laughed and laughed. Luke was able to resist no longer. The lightsaber rattled violently on the throne a moment, and then flew into his hand, impelled by the Force. He ignited it a moment later and swung it with his full weight downward toward the Emperor's skull. In that instant, Vader's blade flashed into view, parrying Luke's attack an inch above the Emperor's head. Sparks flew like forging steel, bathing Palpatine's grinning face in a hellish glare. Luke jumped back and turned, lightsaber upraised, to face his father. Vader extended his own blade, poised to do battle. The Emperor sighed with pleasure and sat in his throne, facing the combatants, the sole audience to this dire, aggravated contest. So right there, sparks like forging steel and hellish glare, all those words kind of prove how violent the duel is. And, there's a certain tone with Star Wars that you have to maintain. You have to make it lighter, and you have to keep it kind of on a constant move and constantly cutting, because that's how Star Wars is. And that's, a piece of Disney Star Wars that they don't know how to make Star Wars, because they can't even get the normal tone or feel of Star Wars down. It's not supposed to be, a 1 hour yap session, right? That's not what Star Wars is. Star Wars, you're supposed to constantly be moving to new planets, new actions, and even during fights, you're not supposed to sit on anything. You know, like, look at the scene where Anakin's mother dies and that whole, like, it's so quick. She dies, we see him cut a couple Tuskens, and it's like, all right, we get the point. And we move to Yoda and Mace. Then we move on, and it's like, we get the point, because that's how Star Wars flows. So George couldn't, like, spend a lot of time here, because that's just not how Star Wars works, but he makes these novels for the intention of furthering the story, which is great. Yeah. So, let's go to... Slowly, Luke and Vader circled, lightsaber high above his head. Luke readied his attack from classic first position. So already they had like lightsaber styles and positions back in 1983. The Dark Lord held a lateral stance in classic answer. Without announcement, Luke brought his blade straight down. Then, when Vader moved to parry, Luke feinted and cut low. Vader counter-parried. Let the impact direct his sword towards Luke's throat, but Luke met the reposit and stepped back. The first blows traded without injury. Again, they circled. Vader was impressed with Luke's speed, pleased even. It was a pity, almost. He couldn't let the boy kill the Emperor yet. Luke wasn't ready for that, emotionally. There was still a chance Luke would return to his friends if he destroyed the Emperor now. He needed more extensive tutelage first, training by both Vader and Palpatine, before he'd be ready to assume his place at Vader's right hand, ruling the galaxy. Right there, that is stuff that most people would not get from the movie. Again, I got that vibe, but I didn't totally get it. You know, I had assumptions in the back of my head, but I wasn't totally sure that was like the deal, but it is. So it was a lie. Like, if Luke killed the Emperor there, you know, he would not have directly turned. It would have taken a little more, you know, of a thrust into the dark side, which is what Vader was doing. He was toying with Luke, which he does in both times he fights him. He toys with him, you know, for different reasons, to try to get him to turn. So that is a really, really cool little, you know, detail. So Vader had to shepherd the boy through periods like this, stop him from doing damage in wrong places or in the right places prematurely. Before Vader could gather his thoughts much further, though, Luke attacked again, much more aggressively. He advanced in a flurry of lunges, each met with the loud crack of Vader's phosphorescent saber. The Dark Lord retreated at a step at every slash, swiveling once to bring his cutting beam up viciously, but Luke batted it away, pushing Vader back yet again. The Lord of the Sith momentarily lost his footing on the stairs and tumbled to his knees. So that's when Vader, you know, Luke does the thing and he goes, and he kind of spirals down the staircase. A lot of this we don't even see in the movie. It's we go, you know, Luke grabs a saber, Vader parries, there's like, and then Vader falls. So it's like we don't get a lot of this fight because it cuts to the Battle of Endor midway through this section of the fight. So it's cool to get to see it, you know? Or read it, I guess. Luke stood above him at the top of the staircase, heady with his own power. It was in his hands now. He knew it was. He could take Vader, take his blade, take his life, take his place at the Emperor's side. Yes, even that. Luke didn't bury the thought, though, this time. He gloried in it. He engorged himself with its juices, felt its power tingle his cheeks. It made him feverish, this thought, with lust so overpowering as to totally obliterate all other considerations. He had the power, the choice was his. And then another thought emerged, slowly compulsive as an ardent lover. He could destroy the Emperor too, destroy them both, and rule the galaxy, avenge and conquer. It was a profound moment for Luke, dizzying, yet he did not swoon, nor did he recoil. He took one step forward. Look, right there, in this little section, like, Luke stands at the stairs, you know, he's holding his saber, and then he goes, whoosh, you know, and he's like, you know, he turns the saber off. Vader walks up the stairs, and he's like, what's the line? Something about how foolish it is to put down your weapon, you know, in the middle of a fight. And just before the saber turns off for Luke, these are all of his thoughts. You know, when he kicks Vader off, and you see, like, Mark Hamill's face, and he's so, like, furious, and, like, you see the power in him, right? Like, that he feels he has. And we just got a full dive into his head right at that moment, which is amazing. And this proves to me how much I know these movies, because it's like, which is nice, because, like, a lot of this is, like, what I've had in the back of my head as I watch these scenes, you know, or this scene. But I'm never like, oh, I think I'm pushing myself a little. I think it's a little much. No, it's actually what was happening. It's so weird to me to get, like, a full explanation of, like, what you thought was going on. That's, like, it's a cool experience. For the first time, the thought entered Vader's consciousness that his son might best him. He was astounded by the strength Luke had acquired since their last duel in the Cloud City. There you go. So not only does this destroy The Last Jedi, it also train wrecks, you know, any of the stupid new 2020 comics. I don't read them, so I don't know if Vader fights Luke in those canon comics, but if that does happen, that's bull. Like, I'm telling you, this book is technically canon. I don't know if Disney messed with it. It's possible, but, you know, this is canon, because this is part of, you know, in my canon. Anyways, not to mention the boy's timing, which was owned to a thought's breadth. This was an unexpected circumstance, unexpected and unwelcome. Vader felt humiliation crawling in on the tail of his first reaction, which was surprise, and his second, which was fear. And then the edge of humiliation curled up to reveal bald anger. And now he wanted revenge. These things were mirrored, each facet by the young Jedi who now towered above him. The Emperor, watching joyously, saw this and goaded Luke on to revel in his darkness. Use your aggressive feelings, boy. Yes, let the hate flow through you. Become one with it, let it nourish you. Luke faltered a moment, then realized what was happening. He was suddenly confused again. What did he want? What should he do? His brief exultation, his microsecond of dark clarity, which is that whole last page was basically that microsecond of dark clarity, gone. Now in a wash of indecision, veiled enigma, cold awakening from a passionate flirtation. There you go. Again, The Last Jedi bashed by that little, you know, section. Like, guys, there is so much proof to, you know, I don't want to use this as, like, to dismantle a Disney video, which I've already have before, but, like, there are things that, like, I just cannot help myself but think about how it just, again, destroys what Disney is doing, you know, and just proves how wrong it is. Because, like, this is just straight proof, right? Like, I don't know what more proof you want. And it's, at this point, it's like ignorance to say, well, that fit. Like, no. I don't know. Anyways, he took a step back, lowered his sword, relaxed, and tried to drive the hatred from his being. In that instant, Vader attacked. He lunged half up the stairs, forcing Luke to reverse defensively. He bound the boy's blade with his own, but Luke disengaged and leaped to the safety of an overhead gantry. Vader jumped over the railing to the floor beneath the platform on which Luke stood. So they took the line out of Vader saying it was unwise to lower your defenses. I guess they didn't include that in here, which is fine, because they already did a whole section on I will not fight you, Father, Luke stated. Oh, here it is. You are unwise to lower your defenses, Vader warned. His anger was layered now. He did not want to win if the boy was not battling to the fullest. But if winning meant he had to kill a boy who wouldn't fight, then he could do that too. Only he wanted Luke to be aware of those consequences. He wanted Luke to know this was no longer just a game. This was darkness. Very interesting. I didn't know that. So I thought Vader was toying with him the whole time, but I guess not. Now at this point, that kick made Vader so angry he was ready to just kill him. Which is interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't even, there's part of me, when he says, you are unwise to lower your defenses. He says it very, precisely and very strong and angry. So I thought, oh, he's mad now, but I didn't think he was going to kill Luke. But this is just telling you he was literally going to kill him, which is interesting. Luke heard something else, though. Your thoughts betray you, Father. I feel the good in you, the conflict. You could not bring yourself to kill me before, and you won't destroy me now. Twice before, in fact, to Luke's recollection. Vader could have killed him, but didn't. In the dogfight over the first Death Star, and later in the lightsaber duel on Bespin. He thought of Leia briefly now, too, of how Vader had her in his clutches once, had even tortured her, but didn't kill her. He winced to think of her agony, but quickly pushed that from his mind. The point was clear to him. Though so often so murky, there was still good in his father. This accusation really made Vader angry. He could tolerate much from the insolent child, but this was insufferable. He must teach this boy a lesson he would never forget or die learning. Once again, you underestimate the power of the dark side. Vader threw his scintillating blade. It sliced through the supports, holding up the gantry on which Luke, and then swept around and flew. Right, this is something, okay, this is cool. I'll actually read this part. It sliced through the supports, holding up the gantry on which Luke was perched, then swept around and flew back into Vader's hand. I've heard people who do the stupid, over-examine movies thing, and they're like, how did Vader magically get his saber back? If you watch it, even in normal speed, Vader throws his saber, it cuts, and you can see it fly back for a split second. So to me, I always knew Vader just caught it again. But I guess to some other people who don't know Star Wars or can't go back in frames, they thought Vader just spawned a saber again. No, that's not really what happened. Luke tumbled to the ground, then rolled another level under the tilting platform. In the shadow of the darkened overhang, he was out of sight. Vader paced the area like a cat, seeking the boy, but wouldn't enter the shadows of the overhang. You cannot hide forever, Luke. You'll have to come in and get me, replied the disembodied voice. I will not give you the advantage that easily. Vader felt his intentions increasingly ambiguous in this conflict. The purity of his evil was being compromised. The boy was clever indeed. Vader knew he must move with extreme caution now. I wish no advantage, Father. I will not fight you. Here, take my weapon. Luke knew full well this might be his end, but so be it. He would not use darkness to fight darkness. Perhaps it would be left to Leia, after all, to carry on the struggle without him. Perhaps she would know a way he didn't know. Perhaps she could find a path. For now, though, he could see only two paths, and one was into darkness, and one was not. Luke put his lightsaber on the ground, and it rolled along the floor toward Vader. It stopped halfway between them, in the middle of the low overhead area. The Dark Lord reached out his hand. Luke's saber... What the heck? Luke's lightsaber jumped into it. He hooked it onto his belt, and with grave uncertainty entered the shadowy overhang. What? Guys, this is my first time reading it too. I just saw the section. I was like, I'm going to just do it without reading it before. I skimmed it, but I did not know this was originally part. So apparently Luke didn't even have his saber when what the heck, dude? This duel is so much more intense now. Like, what the heck is going on? I had no idea that that even happened. He was picking up additional feelings from Luke. Now, new cross currents of doubt, remorse, regret, abandonment, shades of pain, but somehow not directly related to Vader, to others, to Endor. Ah, that was it. The sanctuary moon where his friends would soon die. Luke would learn soon enough. Friendship was different on the dark side. A different thing altogether. Give yourself to the dark side, Luke, he entreated. It is the only way you can save your friends. Yes, your thoughts betray you, son. Your feelings for them are strong, especially for... Vader stopped. He sensed something. Luke withdrew further into the shadow, which is symbolic for him furthering more into the dark side. He tried to hide, but there was no way to hide what was in his mind. Leia was in pain. Her agony cried to him now, and his spirit cried with her. He tried to shut it up, but the cry was loud and he couldn't stifle it, couldn't leave it alone, had to cradle it openly to give it solace. Vader's consciousness invaded that private place. So Vader was, I guess, mind-reading Luke in that moment. Very interesting. I think that cry in pain is also when Leia gets shot, remember, on the shoulder by a stormtrooper. So, again, never even thought about that. Ever. Because it's so, like, not, you know, it's edited in, like, kind of battle chunks. So, I didn't know that, like, was what Luke was feeling in that moment. I had no idea. Anyways. No, Luke screamed. Vader was incredulous. Sister, he bellowed. Your feelings have betrayed her too. Twins, he roared triumphantly. Obi-Wan was wise to hide her, but his failure is now complete. His smile was clear to Luke. Through the mask, through the shadows, through all the realms of darkness. If you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will. This, then, was Luke's breaking point, for Leia was everyone's last unflagging hope. If Vader turned his twisted, misguided cravings on her. Never, he screamed. His lightsaber flew off Vader's belt into his own hand, igniting as it came to him. He rushed to his father with a frenzy he'd never known, nor had Vader. The gladiators battled fiercely, sparks flying from the clash of their radiant weapons, but it was soon evident that the advantage was all Luke's, and he was pressing it. They locked swords, body to body, when Luke pushed Vader back to break the clinch. The Dark Lord hit his head on an overhanging beam in the cramped space. He stumbled backward even further, out of the low-hanging area. Luke pursued him relentlessly. Blow upon blow, Luke forced Vader to retreat back, onto the bridge that crossed the vast, seemingly bottomless shaft to the power core. Each stroke of Luke's saber pummeled Vader, like accusations, like screams, like shards of hate. The Dark Lord was driven to his knees. He raised his blade to block yet another onslaught, and Luke slashed Vader's right hand off at the wrist. The hand, along with bits of metal, wires, and electronic devices, clattered uselessly away, while Vader's lightsaber tumbled over the edge of the span into the endless shaft below, without a trace. Luke stared at his father's twitching, severed mechanical hand, and then at his own black-gloved, artificial part, and realized suddenly just how much he'd become like his father, like the man he hated. Trembling, he stood above Vader, the point of his glowing blade at the Dark Lord's throat. He wanted to destroy this thing of darkness, this thing that was once his father, this thing that was him. Suddenly, the Emperor was there, looking on, chuckling with uncontrollable, pleased agitation. Good! Kill him! Your hate has made you powerful. Now fulfill your destiny and take your place at your father. Take your place at my side. Take your father's place at my side. Wow, I butchered that. Luke stared at his father beneath him, then at the Emperor, then back at Vader. This was darkness. And it was the darkness he hated. Not his father, not even the Emperor, but the darkness in them. In them and in himself. And the only way to destroy darkness was to renounce it, for good and all. He stood suddenly erect. He made the decision for which he'd spent his life in preparation. He hurled his lightsaber away. Never, never will I turn to the dark side. You have failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. The Emperor's glee turned to a sudden, sullen rage. So be it, Jedi. If you will not be turned, you will be destroyed. Should we keep going? We're at 27. Probably not. I could do that separately. That's kind of its own thing. Okay. So, I'm gonna double check. Yeah, we could make that a separate video. So that is that whole fight and what was going on in that fight and the emotions of the characters and how riveting it was and how they were pulling on each other's like emotional strings the entire time. There's tons of really cool stuff that we had no idea of, like, you know, Luke's saber rumbling on the Emperor's throne, or Luke not even having his saber, you know, during the scene when he's like, so you have a sister, like that no one knows that unless you read this book, right? And Luke, you know, yanks it off of his dad's belt again, just like he did with the Emperor's throne, and history repeats himself. He's back in that same loop, and then he finally, you know, does what his whole life had built up to, and that was to overcome darkness. He deactivates its blade, tosses it. That is one of the most pivotal moments in Star Wars. Easily the most pivotal moment in the original trilogy. And is really what turns the tide of, you know, I think the war with the dark side and the darkness, you know, after Order 66, was that move. Simply Luke deactivating his saber and tossing it was what separated him from 95% of the other Jedi, right? Qui-Gon would be the only other one to do that, right? So probably 99% of the other Jedi. I don't even know if Yoda would do that, right? That is such a, like, huge moment in Star Wars history that, you know, I feel people just kind of glide over, and it's like, no, that's a big deal. Like, that is what turns the tide of the war. Like, everything from that point shifts to the light side. Vader sees Luke, realizes, oh, wait, why didn't he just kill me? All right, so pretty much what I already previously said was what the book said. That Vader was basically looked at Luke and saw, you know, the amount of anger that, you know, he had in him, and was like, well, he could have killed me, but no, he didn't. And my master would have just thrown me away. And it was basically, he woke up and he realized, you know, what he was doing, and kind of came back to the light in that moment and killed the Emperor. So that's a really cool, detailed explanation of that fight that you're not going to see anywhere else. So just from that information alone, that is Luke's character. You know, and this isn't even, this is the start of Luke's prime. Luke wasn't even at his prime before this, you know. He was still fighting the darkness within himself. And that one action of him tossing his saber away, that was it. Like, that was the final, you know, culmination of everything that came before. And he chose the light side instead of choosing the dark side. And ultimately now, you know, the Force flows through him. The light side flows through him, you know? Like, this isn't... He's not being a Sith, where he's trying to bend the Force to his will. No, he just learned to trust in the Force because it brings, you know, good into the galaxy, I guess. And that just proves it right there. And he saved thousands of people. He saved himself. He saved his father, you know, from just going to hell, pretty much. And saved the entire galaxy in that moment. So I hope you guys learned something new from that, and just how incredibly written that was by James Caan, you know, with the assistance of George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan. You know, George, whenever they make these novels, he's right with them the whole time as they're writing it and telling them, no, they wouldn't do that, you'd do this. So it's basically by James Caan and George Lucas. That's pretty much what this means. Just James Caan adds that, like, intense vocab and the structure and figures out, you know, he knows the formatting, and he has some creative input, and George has some creative input, and they work together and collaborate. And they made this amazing book. So there are tons of moments like this. That's not true, but there's tons of cool, really cool moments in the other Star Wars films that are novelized, and that I will definitely go through on the channel. And the Revenge of the Sith book by Matthew Stover, which is one of the best books I've ever written, and kind of the full version of Revenge of the Sith, has very, very intense, cool information and, I guess, emotions that's going on during the Mustafar fight in details. And just seeing Anakin's character, you know, slow down and more in detail is really cool. And I'm glad we get these, because then after I've read the novel, it makes the movie, you know, 20 times more, you know, heavy, right? Because, again, with Star Wars, you know, like he said, he made it so 12-year-olds could enjoy it and adults could enjoy it. 12-year-olds don't want to sit on one emotion or one dialogue scene for an hour. They don't. They want to constantly be moving and, like, all right, we get the point, dude, and then moving on. And that's something I had struggled. That's the thing I had difficulties with when I made my Star Wars fan film, was, like, just kind of getting it to a reasonable pace where it's, like, not dragging on, you know? And that's something I realized, you know. I was like, oh, wait, this is a pattern, you know? And George always says, you know, when he's writing, he's editing. He knows each shot to cut to, and that's exactly how I operate. You know, the way I shoot my movies, you know, for my last one I didn't, but what I like to do is to shoot for dialogue. I like this chunk of dialogue or this 2 lines, then we shoot the next person while he's saying the 2 lines, because that's, like, easier to edit for me, because I edit while I'm directing. It's like a really weird thing that the only other person I know of who does that is, you know, George, and he's the one who kind of taught me to do that. And it's really, really cool in the way that how efficient it is and how effective it is, and how you're able to see your movie come to life more and what you need to adjust. And that is something I love from George. And I love, you know, having constantly switching in locations and switching problems and all in conflicts all the time. That way to keep your movie, you know, entertaining. That way it's not like Andor where you're sitting and wanting to snooze the whole show. You know, it's a really well done show, but was it Star Wars? Not necessarily. But that's what I really liked about Ahsoka, is you wouldn't just sit somewhere for too long. You know, like Ahsoka and Sabine would have, like, a conversation, and then it would move. Now, judging that's not a wonderful show all the way through, that was still one thing that I appreciated about it, is it followed that kind of flow with Star Wars, and I really appreciated that. But yeah, that's really how Star Wars should be done. So that was really cool to see, you know, the difference between the book and the movie and how you can connect them. So yeah, these books are like just so good, and I found them. I know this really cool used bookstore in Washington State that has like all these really old Star Wars books, like original copies and stuff, and original VHS tapes and all this stuff for a very insanely cheap price. Like I paid probably $4 for that book, and it's a first edition. So it's called Half Price Books. If you're ever up there, check it out, because their selection is endless. It really is. Yeah, because I go up there for vacation like twice a year, and I'm always sure to go there because I'm like, I know they're gonna have stuff, and every time I find stuff, you know, and it's awesome. So we got more of this to go through. I'm not gonna do it this in order, but you know, I have more Return of the Jedi. I have Empire Strikes Back. I have Star Wars, and I bought Jedi Search, which I'll read first, then make videos about. But we have a whole like kind of, I guess, original trilogy run through, and then I have most of the prequel ones too, obviously, you know. So yeah, I'm super excited to dive more into this stuff with you guys over the summer. It's going to be really fun, and I'm looking forward to it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a like, subscribe, and share it to your friends who are interested in George Lucas Star Wars content. Yeah, so thank you for watching. Just remember, the Force will be with you always.